Well, hello, friends. It's John Rustin and Jerry Royal, some of your staff at NC Family, and this is our weekly update for the week ending May the 3rd. Well, Jerry, it's been a very busy week. Of course, the legislature is back in session, but the courts have been particularly active this past week. So we started the week out on Monday with the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals issuing a decision in a case dealing with whether or not the North Carolina State Health Plan which actually provides coverage for 750,000 state employees, teachers, and others, whether the state health plan has to cover things like puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and body mutilating gender surgeries. As we've previously reported, State Treasurer Del Falwell, who oversees the state health plan, has determined that it would be improper, inappropriate, and also fiscally destructive, or at least fiscally risky, for the state to provide such coverage. Unfortunately, a majority of the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals disagreed and, in fact, said that it is discriminatory for the state to deny coverage for these drugs and procedures to biological men who identify as women and biological women who identify as men. So, Jerry, tell us kind of your perspective on this and maybe add a little bit of insight.
No, well, it was interesting. A lot of times, Court of Appeals, they have three judges who hear cases. In this situation, the whole Fourth Circuit, 14 judges heard this argument. Sadly, it was an 8-6 decision. And of course, court decisions aren't supposed to be partisan. In this case, it maybe does reflect some of what happened in the decision. The 8 in the majority were appointed by Democrat administrations. The 6 who dissented were appointed by Republican administrations. There were in the interesting language that was used at the beginning of the decision, the judges in the majority opinion talked about medically necessary. Well, that's what North Carolina debated that this past year,
right?
And pointed out the fact that there is tremendous debate, not just in this country, but over in Europe, where they've been doing this for much longer time, and they're backing away from what they've been doing there because they're finding it's not medically necessary and maybe not even helpful at all. They're finding it's not helping people. So the court started out using language that let you know where they were going to go in the majority opinion. The dissenting opinion quickly said, they pointed out you did not properly apply law when you were making this decision. And that's sad to have this outcome. And again, like you say, John, it was 60 pages in the majority opinion, 60-some pages in the dissent. So obviously, very different ideas about what the right result was in this case. But again, because we heard a lot of debate this past year in North Carolina, generally it's recognized there's not evidence for help. And so the court, in this case, I think clearly overstepped their proper way of addressing this. The other part of it, which Dale Falwell focused on, was the economic part, that people have to make decisions in government, right, making fiscal decisions that can say, this is a wise path, this path may be harmful. And we're talking about 750,000 plus
huge
state
coverage under the state health plan. Yeah,
exactly. Yep. Who could be impacted if this affects the economic life of the state health plan. So they were making a decision. They were supposed to have looked at that and weighed that in the balance and recognized this is not recognized as medically necessary and economically could be potentially very harmful.
Yeah, well, and considering the extent of these drugs and services and all that entails, he didn't necessarily say this. The state treasurer did not necessarily say this, but this is something that could potentially bankrupt the state health plan if a bunch of state employees and others who are covered by the plan seek these kinds of procedures and so forth. So something that we've been following, have been really appreciative of State Treasurer Del Falwell in taking the firm position that he has. And we certainly hope that he will continue and appeal this case, and we'll see where it goes.
Right. last little note on that, John. I know I mentioned the debate this past year in our legislature. These procedures, the chemical and the surgical procedures, are prohibited in North Carolina under the recently passed law because of where the medical and scientific evidence points right now,
Right.
that people's lives have not been helped, and that there's much more evidence indicating that. So,
Yeah.
sad situation, and very troubling situation on this issue.
And that was just Monday. So
Yeah.
then on Tuesday, a federal district court judge, Catherine Eagles, issued an opinion in a case challenging North Carolina's law regarding the chemical abortion drug mifepristone. Now, the FDA originally approved the use of mifepristone in 2000, but with numerous restrictions and labeling requirements, including things like allowing only physicians to prescribe the drug, administering the drug in person at the physician's office, so in the presence of the physician, having the patient agree to return for a follow-up appointment to, quote, confirm that the pregnancy has ended and the patient is well, and also reporting of any adverse events or effects from the use of the drug to the FDA. Well, since that time, the FDA has significantly loosened these restrictions and ultimately eliminated them altogether. Well, in response to this and over concerns about women's health and safety, the North Carolina General Assembly subsequently passed legislation to essentially reinstate these provisions into state law. Well, these laws were challenged by an abortionist in Chapel Hill, and unfortunately, Judge Eagles largely sided with that abortionist and said that these provisions that are seeking to help protect the interest in health and safety of women who are using mifepristone, she said that those laws were not valid and should be overturned.
Again, basing it on the fact they're saying, what is the authority of the FDA? What is the authority of state government? It's, again, very troubling that this decision has come out right after. This has just been argued at the U.S. Supreme Court. Alliance Defending Freedom was involved in arguing that case, pointing out just what you're saying, John, that these measures that were put in place when the drug was first approved have been removed. Well, their argument before the U.S. Supreme Court was those changes were not properly made.
Right.
They didn't follow, again, medical scientific procedures that need to be followed when you're making important decisions like this. And right now, there were different U.S. Circuit Courts of Appeals with different outcomes. Nobody yet knows. It may be this summer before the ruling comes out from the U.S. Supreme Court. So it's puzzling that a district court would come out with an opinion when we're waiting on an opinion from the U.S. Supreme Court on this very subject.
Well, and this opinion is particularly troubling because as the Guttmacher Institute, which is funded by pro-abortionist groups, has identified over 63% of all abortions in the United States in 2023 were chemical abortions using mifepristone. And so, this is a huge concern that this federal district court judge in North Carolina ruled on this case in an unfavorable manner. There were actually some provisions of the law relating to mifepristone that she said were okay, but she said, as you have mentioned, Jerry, that the legislature trying to pass these provisions into state law really conflicted with Congress's intent when it set up the FDA and charged it with setting restrictions and regulations on these types of drugs. So we do anticipate and hope and pray that the state will, or our legislative leaders who intervened in this case will appeal it because this is really, really vitally important. Interestingly, I say our state legislative leaders, of course, Attorney General Josh Stein is supposed to defend state laws against legal challenges like this, but in this case, he refused to defend the state law and actually sided with the abortionist. And so he basically sided with the plaintiff, which resulted in our state legislative leaders, Speaker of the House Tim Moore and President Pro Tem of the Senate Phil Berger, to step in and seek to intervene in the case as defendants, which the court allowed them to do, and we really appreciate their leadership on that. So we will certainly be watching as this case also hopefully will be appealed and hopefully will come to a different conclusion. But we did want to bring that to your attention. Of course, there are links to articles that we've written on these two matters below the video, so you can read up more about those. We just don't have time to go into a whole lot more detail in this video. So, Jerry, that's Tuesday. And then on Wednesday, there was actually a bit of good news when the State Senate Base Budget Committee met at the General Assembly and approved a bill that would appropriate an additional $248 million for opportunity scholarships in this next school year. As we've been mentioning for weeks and discussing, the General Assembly significantly expanded eligibility and funding for opportunity scholarships last year, making it a universal program that all families in the state could take advantage of as long as funding was available. Well, what happened is they ran out of funding because the interest and demand was so high. And so fortunately, the General Assembly, at least the Senate so far, came back and has passed this bill on Wednesday in the State Senate Base Budget Committee. And then on Thursday in the full Senate, that bill also passed. And so it's on its way over to the House now. This $248 million is really designed, based on the numbers and the applications that were submitted, would eliminate the waiting list of families that applied for opportunity scholarships but were denied because the demand far outpaced the funding that was provided by the General Assembly last year.
Exactly. Yeah, and I know we mentioned in an earlier week that the Speaker of the House has indicated, of course they haven't voted, but that he himself and a number of the leadership in the House are supportive of this effort to meet this need.
Yeah, so that's very exciting. Really good news on both Wednesday and Thursday. And Jerry, I'd have to say probably the best thing, the best news of this week was that Thursday was the National Day of Prayer, which of course is a time for people across our nation to come together in prayer for our families, our communities, our states, our nation, and the world. And it's just great to the theme and the scripture verse that really was the focus of the National Day of Prayer. The theme was lift up the word, light up the world. And the verse is based on 2 Samuel 22, verses 29 through 31, which say, "For you are my lamp, O Lord, and my God lightens my darkness. For by you I can run against a troop, and by my God I can leap over a wall. This God, his way is perfect. The word of the Lord proves true. He is a shield for all those who take refuge in him." And Jerry, I think that, it could be kind of a seminal verse for the Family Policy Council and the work that we do at the legislature. We really seek to, and you do such a great job, Sharon does such a great job, and our staff do such a great job of being a light for God's truth and biblical principles in the public policy and political arena in North Carolina. So this, the National Day of Prayer was just a very special time for, I know, us individually, for our communities, and for our state and our nation. And we pray that that you had a special time as well on Wednesday. Jerry, I know this is something, I mean, it's a day set aside for focusing on prayer, but it's something that we need to do regularly and daily in our pursuit of what the Lord has in store for us.
Well, it is, and I know we talk about it. We appreciate you all working together with us and praying together with us. And as you say, John, it's good that we have a specific day that we recognize National Day of Prayer. And as you say, we've got an email that we have a link to that explains what happened on that day, how we can all pray, now, obviously not just that day, but every day. And along with that, we have, with the Day of Prayer, we have a link to an additional article that the Family Policy Council put out about how to pray for elected officials. And there are a lot of helpful tools there. One of the most important ones that's very helpful for me is Capitol Commission has a daily email, and they take you through different elected officials. They've got legislative officials on the state and federal level, judicial officials, executive officials, and they take you through those so that you see a face, and it just is a helpful way to put the reality. These are people who are there to represent us. We need to pray for God's wisdom, strength, courage, and like you say, that they would be looking to Him and His Word as they're making decisions like we just talked about today.
Yeah.
Judges in the courts, legislators, as they did this week.
Yeah. Well, and Jerry, in our current environment, it is so divisive. And one of the best things that we can do is pray for our elected officials, not only to lift them up and pray that God's hand would be upon them and that they would submit and surrender to God's will, but it also softens our hearts to them and helps make us more sensitive to the sacrifices that they make, to the pressures that they're under. And so these emails that we get daily, and just the desire that we have to engage in relationships and to pray for our elected officials makes a huge difference.
Right.
So, friends, thank you for your continued prayers and involvement and support of the Family Policy Council. We appreciate you so much. Gosh, I think we've gone through a lot of stuff. It's been a busy week. Of course, we expect another busy week next week, and we'll be reporting to you at the end of next week. But thanks so much for your prayers, your support, and your engagement and involvement, because as we work together in partnership with you and with the Lord, we can see just amazing things happen in our state. So thank you all. God bless you, and God bless your families.